How's it going, friends, and welcome back to the channel. So in this episode we are going to be looking at a lot of brass. In this episode we are going to be mainly looking at the upper hull and putting a lot of these brass parts into place and just generally finishing the upper half of the hull, and also cutting a whacking big hole in the side. So one of the things I like about using PE is it can add a lot more to your models. It can make things look a little bit more realistic from what the some of the kit parts can, and also it gives you a bit more scope to be able to make the model, whatever you're working on, to look a little bit more damaged if that's what you want to go for. So for example, the front fenders on the Jag, which come within the Voyager upgrade kit that I've got for this, it's not within the kit itself. The plastic ones, they're fine, they're okay. They're a little bit out of scale. I mean, you can thin the edges out to make them look right, but of course that means a little bit of extra work and a lot of mess. But with the photo etch parts, they look more true to scale, and again, you can do damage to them. You can make them look bent up, like they've been hit with something, or even put in bullet holes that have gone straight through, which are very easily done. Just use something like either use a drill, or even if you've got an old like needle, whether it's a sewing needle or an airbrush needle, just basically punch that through and that'll give you a nice perfect shell hole or a bullet hole within that piece of metal. Now, the Voyager kit wasn't a necessary upgrade that I needed to get for the Jag, but again, like I said, it adds for me some bits that I can work with and make it look more battered without needing to go through sanding large chunks of plastic down. Also with stuff like the track link, spare track link, I'm going to call them holders or racks, whatever you want to call them. Again, these look a little bit more kind of accurate in a fashion than the actual kit, even though the kit ones are really nicely detailed. They are a little bit thick. It's not a problem. It's not something that's necessary, because as I've said God knows how many times, this kit is fantastically detailed, so it's not something that's necessary. But I like, as you probably all well know if you've been following me for a while, making things so much harder for myself, and this kit I've really done that on this one. I'm just rambling now, so what we'll do is we'll jump straight into it. Make sure you grab yourself a good brew and a bicky first, and I'll catch you on the other side. So before I start adding any extra bits to the model, I want to remove the sidewall for the museum side of the diorama, which meant cutting a large chunk out the side of the tank, which then will give us the view inside the vehicle when it's on display, as we can see here. So once that's done and dusted out of the way, I can start moving on with the rest of the model. Now, I've decided to add a little bit of extra texture to the texture that's already on the mantlet. Probably wasn't necessarily, but I wanted to add it. Theirs was a little bit smoother than what I'd like, so doing it my own way, using some putty and some extra thin glue, make it into a bit of a sloppy paste with a really rough old brush. Just slap that in on the mantlet. Once it dries, I'm going to give it a little bit of a light sanding. Any very sharp bits of putty that's protrudes a little bit too much than it should will be nicely smoothed out to fit the rest of the texture. And once it's dry, I can fit that into place, and it fits nice and snugly into the front. Now I want to just slip this little bit in because we're not really going to see it anyway, and part of the reason why I want to show this is this lovely detail of the coaxial machine gun. It says because the way I'm doing this, you're not actually going to see it. So we move on to the large and copious amounts of brass, partly with the brass that comes in the kit and the brass upgrade kit I bought, which results in a lot of brass. Now, the kit brass is fine. You don't really need the upgrades. Most of the upgrades are quite small, little details that replace bits that are already in the kit anyway. But you know, I wanted to. I just wanted to make life harder. So one of the nice things I like about brass upgrades, and particularly with stuff like these here, as you can see, I'm doing a comparison there between the original kit and the upgrade kit, which I've put onto the model. There's a very small difference. It's not really, you know, major difference between the two parts. But one of the things I like to do, and the reason why I like using brass, is because you can do so much more with it and make, you know, your vehicles or your whatevers, you know, look a little bit more different and interesting. Now, doing some research and looking at a lot of tanks and visiting Bovington, I noticed a lot of these sort of vents, particularly stuff like on the Jagdpanther, something that's got a very large engine deck that, you know, crew are going to be walking over a lot. These get ripped up a lot and producing obviously massive holes. Obviously the heat from the engine has, you know, weakens the metal, and, you know, walking across it and catching it, whatever, pulls it out or pulls it up, whichever way, and you know, it gives you that more of a realistic look. So as you can see there with the larger venting, now I've pulled that out, considering again I've seen this on you know, genuine vehicle. And again, it just adds a nice, you know, a nice addition to the model. Now, one thing I am doing with this model is putting all the little extra details in, which I'd normally paint completely separate. But I think with, you know, building it, it's actually, in the case of this one, for me, is actually going to be a lot easier and maybe a little bit more difficult afterwards to paint. But I've just decided to try and make it easy with the build, and just because there's so many small parts that I'd need to put on afterwards, it was just easier just to put it all on, just like this mini tow cable, which again is a nice little add to the model. Now, with the upgrade kit from Voyager, they give you this retainer wire for the door, which, as you can see, I snapped, and all that was left was the connecting parts, because of course I'd already glued the handles down. So with a bit of twizzly wire and some brass tubing, I made my own, which later on I had to shorten because it was too long. So now I'll move on to some of the storage bins that go on the back. This one is from the upper hull, and you know, you don't need a bending tool for these, but it does make life a hell of a lot easier, especially with large parts like this and you want to bend them straight. You know, it does make life a little easier. You could also, if you wanted to, you could actually make your own of these. There's plenty of videos out on the YouTubes that will show you how to do these, but I actually managed to pick this one up relatively cheap, as where these generally are quite expensive, especially some of the larger ones. So maybe check out some of those DIY brass bender tools. Now, this one in particular I super glued, but it is actually a little bit better if you can sort of weld them by using solder and a soldering iron to do it, which I'll show you a little bit later. Now, what I do with this, which I should have done beforehand, was anneal the metal, because I wanted to add these bit of bullet damage. When I went to heat it up, of course, not thinking super glue is highly flammable, and went up, so I had to re-glue it later. This is kind of how it should have been done. It's not quite the right way because I'm not using the right solder. You want a solder that will melt at a lower temperature. I think that's the right way. This is electrical solder, so it does take quite a while for it to want to go. But what you want to do is put some solder flux down first to help it flow, and then with a soldering iron just heat the back of, you know, your brass part, and eventually it will go, and it will sort of, you know, kind of chain react, and hopefully it will fill out into the area that you want to solder up. But as you can see, it's taken a hell of a long time because unfortunately I'm using the wrong solder, but I wanted to sort of show you how I did it and also how not to do it. Now, of course, that was a front fender piece, and these are the front fenders in place. As you can see, being these brass parts gives you more scope to do some sort of more natural damage and make them look, you know, well worn and used if you wish to do so. But also they're the right thickness that they actually should be. Of course, if you're using the plastic ones, you know, they're a little bit thicker and a little bit unrealistic. Now moving on to the roof of the tank, as you can see, it's very easily, all the parts are easily put together. The hatches are, you know, usable if you want to. All you need to do is just put the hatch into place and glue the sort of hinge part to the model, and try not to glue the hatch to that hinge as well, which does leave them flexible, but you know, you need to be a bit careful not to get that glue into the areas that you don't want to. Now there's one last detail that needs to go in the roof, which I will show you in a second. So as we move forward, as you can see, I've had to fill in a little bit more underneath that open area of the side of the tank. I cut it a little bit too low, hoping that that side skirt sort of top part would be fine. It wasn't, so I had to cut a bit of plastic off, which that I cut out of that hole, put it in and fill it out. Now, again, with the beauty of using photo etch is, you know, we can damage these parts. So with these top fender parts, I've bent and manipulated them into, you know, a quite well worn look, and then all that's needed to be done is fix them into place. Again, I've used super glue because I'm not overly worried about these parts in particular. But as you can see on the top of the rear of the tank, the spare track retainers, I actually did solder those into place. Now, for whatever reason, my videoing seems to have gone into complete slow motion. I have absolutely no idea why. That's why it's so slow. But eventually, we get there. Okay, it was taking way too long, so I cut it down, and this is what it looks like put in, and with that little bit of worn damage. Next, I'm adding a few extra details. Now, I've seen this on a reference photo I've been using for this tank, and these U-bolts are welded on to the side of the vehicle, which I'm going to run some wire through later on. Simple brass wiring, bent over and drilled and stuck into place. So the last thing we want to do before we go to paint is put some metal primer on. I'm using Mr. Hobby's metal primer R for this. This will give the paint something better to adhere to rather than just the primer, particularly if we accidentally knock any parts. This will give the primer a little bit more durability, and we'll paint this over every single brass part. So that's pretty much it. So stick around for a little bit and I'll show you this section all finished. And so there we go. That's the tank pretty much all ready for paint. All I need to do now is mask up the side area and the rear of the tank, obviously to get no overspray. But you can see all the brass parts into place, everything ready to go, and it's looking pretty snazzy if I do say so myself. So there we go, my friends. That's all, or nearly all, the photo etch parts that are going to go. All that need to go on it are the side skirts, which we'll look at a little bit later on in the build. So yeah, it's looking really good. I'm really happy with it. You know, just them photo etch parts for me make a great addition, especially with like the storage bins at the back. you know, make them look like they've been battered and smashed about, and of course putting a couple of bullet holes in there for extra effect. So yeah, so I'm really chuffed with it. I am glad I got the upgrade kit, and like I said at the start, it's for this one in particular, it's not really something that's needed, but again, it's a nice little add. So in the next episode, we'll look at painting this little beast up and doing some weathering. So I hope you guys can catch, will stick with us, and you know, catch us in the next episode. Do hope you've enjoyed this episode. I'd also like to thank you guys for all your support. It's been amazing. Really do appreciate it. Also the guys that have donated as well, you know, really appreciate it. It does help the channel. If you'd like to help support in that way as well, there are links in the description down below. And again, thank you guys ever so much for your support, whether it's donations or just subscribing to the channel and hitting that like button. You know, it's great, and do honestly really appreciate it. If you are new around here and you haven't done so already, and you have liked what you've seen, please, you know, consider like and subscribing to the channel. Again, greatly appreciated. So again, guys, thank you ever so much, and I'll catch you again soon.